Hello and welcome to the Stacking Dingers Show, your home for all things Underdog, Major League Baseball. You can visit our Substack at stackingdingers.com for this show, our rankings, and all other written content. I am, of course, Matthew, aka Sheep, aka Dark Sheep. You can find me on X at D4RKSH33P underscore. And every Friday night, I'm drafting and streaming at the Sheep Seats on YouTube. Fellow Stacking Dinger contributor Nez is here with me tonight, or today, whatever the time is. Usually we record these at night. He is at Nez Takes on X, and you can find him streaming all Underdog sports at Badge Bros on YouTube. So this week we have a special guest in Derek Carty, and many of you know him as the creator of the Bat and the Bat X projection systems. That you can find the season-long version for free on Fangraphs, which many people watching this already know and use often. The daily version, of course, is available on Roto-Grinders if you're a DFS or daily drafter, and there's a betting model available on EV Analytics. And that doesn't even include all the places you can find him streaming and making video content. So welcome, Derek.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So, while you may not be a super big drafter on Underdog, or if maybe you've never even drafted a baseball team on there, but this week we are having you on to kind of just talk generally about projections, something that a lot of players use now and are gravitating towards as the MLB best ball game develops and matures. So we're going to talk that. We're going to talk some bat specific things, and then kind of talk about maybe some rule changes and how you've handled that over the course of the time. So first of all, Derek, just like the top super basic view, what is the bat and how does it work?
The bat is a projection system that I've built over the last, probably close to 15 years, several tens of thousands of hours, incorporating basically everything I've learned in my time in the sabermetric space, working for some really good publications with some really smart people that are now making decisions for major league clubs, which is really cool. Basically just everything that I think matters for projecting player performance using really strong methodology that teams are using. That's the bat. We're accounting for variance, we're accounting for aging, we're accounting for sample sizes, we're accounting for multiple years of data, we're accounting for all sorts of context, and we're coming up with a projection that is essentially the average of all possible outcomes, weighted average of all possible outcomes that a guy could see this year.
All right. So a lot of times, or I guess where do you start in the bat? There's sort of a top-down mentality or a ground-up mentality. So are you starting with, I have this many innings pitched among this team, and I'm going to distribute it between these guys and then add in skill level, or are you building up the other way?
It's more the other way. The first thing is kind of building out talent projections for every player, just on a rate basis. So we'll look at, again, the historical data, all the context related to that historical data, run all the fancy math and come up with, okay, in a completely neutral context, Jacob deGrom is a 3.04 ERA pitcher or whatever it would be. And then from there, we do that for every player. And then from there, the bat uses playing time projections from ATC and from Fangraph depth charts. And it kind of takes the rate production, puts it on top of that to get a full season long projection. And it'll do that for every player. And that's kind of the basics of how it works.
So you mentioned the final number that gets published is the weighted average of the players' distributions. What do you think that in that it gets kind of lost the range of outcomes of certain players? And is there anything that you've done or said that kind of not backtracks, but kind of lets people know, hey, there are range of outcomes for these players, and what you're seeing is just one number. How do you sort of like handle that for certain players, and what kind of leads you to land on the number that you land on for players with these large range of outcomes?
I mean, the number that gets landed on is the number that the system spits out. I'm not doing anything special. I'm not tweaking it. I'm not saying, well, I feel differently, I'm going to change this guy. Like, the number is the number, and then people know that that's just coming from the system, and they can make adjustments if they want to. But yeah, I do think a lot of times people misunderstand what a projection is. They think, okay, the bat says he's going to hit 27 home runs, so if he doesn't hit 27 home runs, it's wrong. Like, no, I'm not saying he's going to hit 27 home runs. I'm saying on average, if you were to play the season out 1,000,000 times, he'd probably average about 27 home runs. But he could have a season with 55 home runs. He could have a season with 0 home runs. He gets hurt in the first game. Like, that kind of thing can happen. And the guys that have the widest range of outcomes are rookies, which I get a lot of flack about on Twitter and from people who, I mean, people love rookies. Like, they're exciting, they're young, like teams that suck finally have, you know, a glimmer of hope for the future. And then you look at the projection for the kid and it's like, why do projections hate him? He's so good. I know he's so good. I've heard about him so much, get hyped up. Why do projections think he's terrible? And it's like, well, the projection doesn't really think he's terrible. The projection just realizes how often rookies bust and what kind of a wide range of outcomes we have on these guys. Yes, sometimes they come out and they just smash right away. They're Ronald Acuna or they're Corbin Carroll or whatever. And sometimes they're Jared Kelenic. Like, it's just, you know, there's no way to tell ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And so the projection is kind of like doing the best it can, but also understanding that there's a huge range of outcomes, and some of those really, really bad ones are going to drag it down further than people want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Sheep, do you mind if I ask a quick follow-up to that?
No, go ahead.
So when you have mid-season, right, you have like specifically these rookies that have these wide range of outcomes that we're waiting to figure out. When it comes to the stabilizing of their projection, how long playing time wise does that like on average take, and what kind of data points are you looking at when it comes to trying to stabilize somebody like a fast rising rookie?
Yeah, so it's tough in terms of actual data stabilization, in like the strict statistical sense of it. It's the same for major leaguers as it is for minor leaguers. You know, strikeout rate stabilizes, which is a whole nother discussion, after, you know, 150 plate appearances or whatever it is. That's pretty much the same for the majors and the minors. Where the difference comes in is that the kind of data that we get in the minors is not as reliable as the data that we get in the majors. Obviously, they're facing different levels of competition. Some guys are working on certain skill sets that, you know, maybe they're not giving 100% like they would in the majors because they're just trying to fix this one part of their game. Or like, there's so many different things in the minors that can be going on. So where the quote unquote variance or like the wide range of outcomes for rookies really comes from is just like the unreliability of that minor league data, and you know, how much of a hit players on average tend to take when you look at what they do in the majors following even really, really good minor league data. And so that's kind of more what I mean when I say that.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, that kind of ties into what I had for a follow-up was, you know, even though, you know, you might have a lower projection on a rookie than people want, also the bat tends to be a little bit lower than other systems, even separate from what people's expectations are. Do you think that, or where do you think that comes from?
On rookies specifically?
Yeah, specifically on rookies.
Like, I know, a system like Steamer generally tends to be higher on rookies than the bat is. I can only speculate. Like, I don't know what goes into other systems. My best guess is just that the way we're creating we call them major league equivalencies, which is basically where you take minor league numbers and you put them, basically you try to put them on the same scale that a major league number will be on to be able to compare apples to apples. So like if he has 30 home runs in the minors, you can't say that that's the same as 30 home runs in the majors. Maybe 30 home runs in the minors is 25 home runs in the majors or 20 home runs in the majors. And so you make that translation, you put it on a major league equivalent stat line, and then that kind of goes into the projection. But that process in between, that major league equivalency part, is not a straightforward thing. There are a lot of biases to account for, and just lots of different ways to do it. And so I would imagine the way I'm doing it is different than the way Steamer or other people are doing it. I can't say 100% for sure that my way is the better way, but I'm pretty confident in the way that I do it.
Sure. So the way that the Underdog format works is really breaks down the scoring into weekly chunks for players. So the thing that we're always looking for is guys that can score well over the course of a week, as well as once we get into the shorter like playoff periods that are just like 2 single week sprints that advance you to the next round. So a lot of the discussion that we have is around players is, sure, maybe they might get a lot of scoring over a long period of time, but how do they help our lineups on a week by week basis? So I guess I'd love to get your take on like someone taking a look at the whole big total number that you can see there on Fangraphs for a player, and like how to think about that in terms of maybe a week by week, or more in terms of week by week scoring.
My answer is kind of a boring one, and not the answer that a lot of people kind of hope for, which is that I don't really think it matters. I don't think it's predictable enough. Like what I think essentially you're trying to get at is like, which players can we count on to be more consistent, from week to week, as opposed to a guy, big week here, falls off, big week here, falls off. I don't think we can do it. I just think it's random. I guess the only exception to that would be like certain skill sets obviously are going to lend themselves to more variance than others. Like a high home run guy, those home runs are going to come, maybe he hits 1 or 2 this week and none the next week, and then 1 or 2. And then that's just how home runs work. So that will be a little more, I guess, variant week to week than like, OBP will, or like anything else. But other than that, I don't think there's much we can do to project it. We take the best guys and we hope that we get whatever consistency we want out of them, and not much we can do about it.
Yeah, makes sense. Kind of what I assumed. When you have, when we're playing this game, like Matthew's talking about here, we kind of, it becomes such a different beast when you get to these playoffs. So I think that's like something that we are constantly grappling with in our community, is like, well, how do we optimize for those week-long sprints? And I agree with you. I think it's trying to, take big swings on guys while also being able to live through the variance that comes with them during the season. I had a quick question. When it comes to park factors for players, is that something that you outsource, or do you have your own kind of calculations on how to adjust for parks? I'm curious if you have your own independent thoughts that go into your system for those.
Yeah, no, everything that goes into my system, I think everything, I create myself. So I create my own park factors, my own weather factors, my own umpire factors. Every individual component, everything that adds context or something to the projection, basically has its own underlying projection system, to create that number.
Very cool. Very cool. That's interesting. I'd love to know if there's any sort of like differences that you notice between like public info versus like what you have. I know you can't like give away all the secret sauce or anything, but I think you could probably, discern that yourself by looking at numbers. But I find that interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. So I guess when you're taking a look at that big total number again and tying into like that, the park and schedule and that stuff, like, is that like the teams that they're going to play over the course of does that matter in the bad projections? Like where they're going to play?
Especially once you start doing like in-season projections where half the season's been played and you have, only half the schedule left. But even at the start of the year, the bat will look at the team's exact schedule for the coming year. It'll look at the exact mix of parks that they're going to be in, the weather in those parks at the time of year that they're going to be playing in it in. You can't really project, like, okay, they're going to be facing Clayton Kershaw today and Walker Buehler tomorrow. Like it kind of takes like basically an average of, okay, this is what, the projected innings for all the different possible starting pitchers for the Dodgers are. These are their bullpen innings. this is the pitching staff that on average we're expecting them to face on May 15th. Because you can't know who's actually going to pitch that day. So it just takes the average of the pitching staff basically, and the defense and all that kind of stuff.
One of the big topics these days is the word simulations and all that good stuff. So is the bat doing simulations, or what is your overall take on this trend, and how it might apply to what the bat's doing?
I don't have anything against simulations. I think simulations in a lot of cases are very helpful. I do think they've become a bit of a buzzword where people don't fully understand what they are or when you need them. The bat is not a simulation. I don't think it needs to be. It does the same thing a simulation will do, basically, just in a different way. I like my way of doing it. It's proven to do really well historically. If someone's going to build projections using simulations, great, you can probably do a good job doing that. I don't think you have to have simulations to build projections.
Yeah, because when you were talking earlier, you said the words the average result over 10,000 games played.
And I say that as a way for people to try to conceptualize what a projection is, as opposed to actually how I'm arriving at the number.
Yeah, because that's kind of a similar talking point of what people are saying, a simulation is doing for you. So I just want to get that information cleared up.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, it's doing the same thing as a simulation, just without running a simulation.
All right. So we kind of touched on these, but I put together a list of, something I'm calling bat myths or facts. A lot of things that you hear people say when surrounding the discussions about the bat. First one is, the bat is wrong about this guy's playing time. So is that a myth or a fact?
That can be a fact for sure. The playing time projections, I think I said it earlier, I don't create those. I take them from ATC in the preseason, Fangraphs depth chart in season, and I just apply my rate projections to that. I know that they're both better than I can do myself, mostly because I don't have the time or the desire to sit and try to project playing time manually for every single player and team. And I think those guys do a good job. But if there is definitely one part of a projection where I think if someone's going to try to be like, no, I disagree with this projection, I'm going to kind of tweak it to be my own thing, the playing time is definitely the first main part that I think you can look at to do that, because it is such an imprecise thing, because it's not coming from the model, because it's not something we can really objectively project. It's a more subjective thing. And so if you think you have a really good feel for the Pittsburgh Pirates second base job, you can you can adjust the projections for whatever you think.
I can think of an infinite number of better use of my time than wondering if Leover Peguero is going to hold that job. There's much better use of my time.
Yeah, and then the second one we definitely did discuss, but bat hates young, exciting players. So
yeah, that one's true. It hates them, every single one, especially the one you like the most.
But then the third one I have here is something I've heard a little bit more this year, at least in our community, as people are. This is the third season that we've really had this game to try and play and solve. But they're saying, the bat is too extreme on some hitters. So I'd rather use I like it for certain things, but where it gets on the extreme end, I don't want to use it. I'll use other things. I guess that's not really leading to a myth or a fact, but
I'd say it's a myth, and I think they're actually probably doing themselves a disservice. That's a feature, guys. That's not a bug. That's a feature. If the bat thinks this guy is a lot better than the market does or than everyone else does, you should want that guy, especially because the bat has a proven track record of being. Every year, last week, Fantasy Pros came out with their season-long projections accuracy results again. And once again, the bat is the most accurate original projection system. 4 years in a row, since it's been, since I've created it, it's been better than other systems. I mean, that's not to say it's going to continue. That's not like, we're talking about small edges, obviously. But I don't think there's any reason you should be shying away from a guy simply because the bat is different from the crowd. Like that I think is the main reason you want to use a projection system like the bat, as opposed to like an aggregate projection, because it's going to have those takes on extreme guys. And that doesn't mean, okay, whatever. It likes this guy. It thinks he belongs in the 3rd round and he's actually being taken in the 8th. That doesn't mean you have to take him in the 3rd round. Take him in the 6th and then enjoy your profit. Like, it's not I don't know. I think that's silly. And I don't deny, obviously, that the bat will be higher on some guys than others. One of the guys you wrote on your list was Matt Chapman. Like, I've heard some people say, like, well, Matt Chapman was terrible last. Like, why does the bat like him? It's like, well, because it was 1 year of data. He probably got a little bit unlucky. All of his underlying StatCast metrics are great. The bat just thinks he's going to be better this year. And so I think it's important, if you are using projections and trying to figure out, like, how do I blend projections with my own kind of gut feeling and whatnot, I think it's important to realize that the projection is being as objective as possible, and you need to make sure that your gut is not steering you wrong based on recency bias or something else that the bat is already considered, is already in the projection, and you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, Vlad is the other big one that it's pretty high on. It actually kind of, the ADP on Underdog for Vlad is kind of matching where he's at. Like, he hasn't really fallen, but I think in general, maybe because in like Roto and stuff, you have that first base a little more restrictive use on him. But yeah,
he doesn't steal bases, which fantasy people, they always hate first basemen who don't steal bases. It's like, I want to get my 5-tool guy early in the draft or whatever. Give me Ellie De La Cruz over Vlad. What is that?
I hear you there. That's why we play on Underdog. It's just points. It's simplified. No tweaking. Little plug like there. That's why we play with the point system. You don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah. And the funny thing on him to me is coming out of the COVID year where they didn't play, or where they played in the smaller stadiums, the bat was like the lowest on him at that point, because it had taken into the account those things, and now it's the highest.
And I feel like some people have almost like taken that too far. Like, well, Vlad was so good in those other stadiums, but he hasn't been as good since then. So it's like, well, not really, guys. Like, you make the adjustment for it, and he was still really, really good that year. I don't know. It's just, I feel like people get too, but it's like, I get mad when people like grow too attached to splits. It's like, well, he does this at home, or he does this in this park, or he does this in day games, or Vlad only did this when he was playing in Junaid in Florida or wherever it was. Like, they tell part of the story, but there's so much noise in them that you can't just trust that as like the guy's actual talent level in that situation. And you get yourself in trouble if you do that. And I feel like that's kind of something that people are doing with Vlad a little bit. That year where he was in those great parks, like, he also had a 15% barrel rate, which has been more like 11% the last couple years, which is still good, but it's not the same. It wasn't all park driven. He just had a spike year. But all his stuff is still really good. So I think Vlad's going to be just fine.
I definitely think I'm guilty of that, almost like double counting why, he was successful without replacing like the park. Like, if you were to replace those great parks, like with, in Toronto, like, what do those numbers look like? And they probably do look relatively similar. That honestly was not something that I was thinking about, just because I see the heavy swings with Vlad, and, maybe just like misappropriating them with the park itself as opposed to variance. So very interesting. Definitely changed my mind on Vlad a little bit there. He's been like I always kind of fade Vlad on Underdog for various reasons, but I'll definitely mix him in now. Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
And is there any other players while we're here, Nez, that you've noticed looking through the bat that have stood out to you?
Well, I know that like I'm very much in agreement with the Ellie De La Cruz projection, which like I don't know where he's going in categories leagues, but on Underdog he is a premium price, and
Wait,
I
even
think
in underdog leagues he is?
and on Underdog he is a top 40 ADP in points leagues.
Okay. So top 40, I think in roto leagues he's more like top 25. But top 40 is still a lot where I assume I don't play underdog for anyone. I don't know if I've said it yet. I don't play underdog.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I don't know the scoring format exactly, but I assume stolen bases are kind of deflated relative to roto, right? Like they're not worth that much in a points league.
They're worth less than a double.
Yeah. So that's kind of weird to me that Elliott's still going so high there. It's just rookie hype.
He's going next to like Gunnar Henderson.
That's kind of silly, I think.
Yeah, he goes ahead of Gunnar and ahead of Lindor, Altuve, like a lot of like proven names for a guy that finished below average WRC plus, but
that's what people like. They Ellie De La Cruz could be Ronald Acuna. He could be Fernando Tatis. You don't know. Whereas Jose Altuve can't. But like Jose Altuve is far more likely to actually deliver you positive value.
I guess one question I do have is like international players such as, we have Jung Ho Lee to look forward to this season. I'm assuming that when it comes to weighing those statistics, you consider them closer to major leagues than minor league data. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, it's tough. It depends on the league. And the big problem is that with minor league data, there's a constant stream of guys going from the minors to the majors. And so we have a lot of data to look at to say, okay, what happens when a guy goes from AAA to the majors? What happens when a guy goes from AA to the majors? We don't have anywhere near that amount for these foreign leagues, for the KBO or for the Japanese leagues. Now we have, some guys coming over from the Chinese leagues soon. I think we have a couple guys in the like. It's just, it sounds bad, but a lot of it is kind of a guess what that translation factor actually is. You can't treat it the same as the majors, but you can't exactly call it the minors either because it's not. It's its own thing. And so there's a good amount of guesswork involved in that. It's something that I do plan on digging into a little bit more before the start of the season. Like last year, I've gotten a few questions already, like Yamamoto for the Dodgers. Big signing this year. Everyone's excited. And the bat doesn't like him. Every projection system on Fangraphs has him under a 4 ERA, and I think the bat is like 4.3 or something like that. And so everyone's like, well, why does the bat hate Yamamoto? And then they're like, wait, I remember it hated Senga last year too for the Mets. And Senga was great. The problem is just we're dealing with such small sample sizes that we really don't know. It also hated Fujinami, the guy who came up from Oakland and got traded to Baltimore, signed with the Mets recently. Hated him last year too. Was like easily the lowest system on him, but it was closest to being red on him. He had like a 7 ERA. So like Senga's the one people noticed because he was so good and he was the one that did well. But like you don't know. It's another spot where it's really high variance and we don't even have a lot of data to work with to be able to tell us how to translate those numbers. So I might try to fine tune mine a little bit more because I do seem to be the outlier on them, but it's not easy doing those.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that this season you are higher on Fujinami than ATC is. So you've completely reversed course. Congratulations. You've won all goodwill back with the people.
You got like a 6 ERA or what?
4.4, baby. Don't give up on Fujinami. Don't give up on these flamethrowers, man. Don't put together.
All right. So the third kind of section here that I was interested in talking to you about is how to handle the changes and the rules that have come across. They're pretty significant changes between last season. Most of them are staying the same this season, but going backwards to the previous year, how did you approach them, like with like no data or just some minor league data on how those rule changes affected things?
Yeah, don't undersell the minor league data because just some minor league data was so exciting and great to be able to have, because otherwise we would have just been taking shots in the dark. With the minor league data, we had a real controlled experiment where we could see, okay, this is what was going on before they made the changes. This is what went on after the changes. We can probably assume the majors are going to play pretty close to this, which is basically what we saw. Stolen bases were the big one, and the bat basically nailed the stolen base, the change in stolen base environment like perfectly, which I was super happy with. Was there a question in there? I forget.
No, that you answered it. Yeah. What was your approach? And it was using the minor league data.
Yeah, using the minor league data as much as you can, for sure.
So now going from having just the minor league data to a full season of major league data, and mostly the rules staying the same, you just feel pretty confident then extrapolating it from there, because generally when you're looking at a player and progressing them over the course of a few seasons, you're looking backwards. So are you weighting players to last year more than you would normally, or is that not a factor?
I'm not. I mean, you could, but really the way the bat's designed, and I kind of talked about it with the major league equivalency stuff, is that like it tries to put everything on an even playing field. So like it'll say, okay, guy did this in AAA. This is what it would look like if he were playing in the majors instead. He would lose 8 home runs or whatever it would be. The bat basically does the same thing with these rule changes. It says, okay, well, this is the impact that, I think the bat thinks, the pitch clock had on stolen bases. And so, well, what if they were playing with those rules in 2022 and 2021 and 2020? And it kind of adjusts those numbers to put it on a level playing field with the new rules. And so from there, yeah, obviously there's going to be a bit more margin for error in those than in the actual season that they played with the rules. So I guess you could make a case that you should weigh last season a little bit heavier, but in general, I don't think you have to go crazy with it, especially because as soon as you start weighing last season heavier, you're reducing your overall sample size. So anything you might get from weighing last year heavier, you're going to give back a little bit when you have to regress it to the mean, because how do I explain this? So the way a projection will kind of work is you'll have, okay, let's say we have the last 3 years of data, and the guy had 600 plate appearances each of those years. If you're saying I'm going to weigh last year heavier than the year before, effectively you can't count 600 plate appearances for the year before. If you're saying the year before is only 50% as valuable as last year, well, now you're down to 300 plate appearances. And then the year before that, is half as valuable as that. So now it's 150. So now instead of 1,800 plate appearances, 6, 6, and 6, to go into your projection to give you a confidence level of the size of your data, you have 600, 300, and 150. So it's at 950, 850 that you have in. And so the more you start to weight the most previous season higher, the lower the weights on those other seasons are going to go. But you're still only getting that 600 plate appearances from last year, and the other ones are just going down and down and down. And so when you get to the point where it says, okay, well, how confident can we be that this is this guy's skill level, given that he's done it over 600 plate appearances, 950 plate appearances, 1,800 plate appearances, whatever it is, you wind up, you have to project less confidence and closer to the mean the lower the sample size you have. A guy who hits a home run every at bat over 300 at bats, you're going to be a lot more confident as a power hitter than a guy who hits a home run every at bat over 2 at bats, and you're going to project them differently based on that. So the sample sizes matter a lot. And it's not just as simple as being like, well, last year they had the rules, so let's just use last year more. Like, well, no, you still have to account for the noise in last year, which there is a significant amount of.
That kind of leads to the next question about stolen bases. I've seen a lot of, or listened to some other content. People are talking about, whether they're ranking positions or talking about different players compared to last year. specifically, I've heard a lot on stolen bases, and they're saying, well, this year, so we had the rule change last year. This guy stole 53 bases, and now we're projecting him for less despite the rules being the same. So I just think that's a common talking point right now on a lot of content. So I think you answered a little bit on, I've seen you do some answers online about that. So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, this is something that is not just specific to this year. I'm sure it's being exacerbated because of these rule changes, but every year people are like, well, how do you only have this elite speedster projected for 35 stolen bases? Like, he stole 50 last year. Of course he's going to do it again. Like, I can see it. He's so fast. Like, how can you not see that he's so fast and know that he's going to do it again? There's so much more noise in stolen bases than people want to realize. And I think it is because of that. Like, it's very easy to scout speed. It's very easy to see who is fast. But stealing bases is about so much more than just speed. You have to get on base in the first place. You have to actually attempt the stolen base. Then you have to be successful, and success rate is extremely noisy. And so there's so many different components of stolen bases and so many ways, so many places in the chain that it could fail for the guy not to get those 50 stolen bases, that it's really hard to project a guy to do that. And you see it historically when guys wind up having, those huge stolen base seasons, they don't usually do it for that long. They usually fall off like the next year, at least a little bit. You're not falling off from 50 to 10, but you might fall off from 50 to 35. Like a couple of years ago, Whit Merrifield stole 40 bases, and everyone's like, oh man, Whit Merrifield, like, of course he's going to keep running. Like, we know he's like one of the premier speed guys. He had 16 stolen bases the next year. Like, it's just that kind of thing happens. And the projection is being realistic.
You've got a respectable number on my boy Astoria Ruiz, so I can respect that. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, we'll see if he keeps playing.
Oh yeah, that's for 49. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, that's a guy. Yeah, you can see it. How can't you see it?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to steal 67 bases again. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, that's a hell of a follow up there.
Yeah, I definitely this past season I went to when Arizona was in Milwaukee because I had to scout that Carroll speed myself. But like, yeah, you could see, like, even in warm-ups, you could see how much faster he was just doing his jogging.
That's what a friend of mine said, that Carroll passed the eye test in a big way. Like, you could see that he had it. I had a quick question for you. When we're in the thick of things and the season's kicked off and we are looking at players that are not quite popping in results yet, but we're trying to find ways to pinpoint guys that will eventually get there. Outside of like BABIP analysis, which I think has its own flaws, what are some underlying, maybe like StatCast style metrics that if you were to advise somebody like us, like, hey, maybe like keep an eye on this statistic to try to pinpoint a guy that has regression coming his way in a positive fashion?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's no magic bean. There's no easy answer that people kind of want with this. Like, if there was, the projection would be projecting it. You can definitely look though, and you can look at some StatCast stuff, and you can see, okay, well, his barrel rate went up last year, and his launch angle on his hardest hit balls, was really good, and his exit velocity on his fly balls was really good, or went up, or whatever it could be. But the thing that I think people miss with these advanced stats is that they're great, but they have noise too. Mm-hmm. Just because the guy had a great barrel rate last year, over 300 plate appearances, doesn't mean he's going to repeat it next year. Like, it has noise, it's going to regress too. And so that's kind of why projections in general can be a little more conservative than like, a layperson will expect them to be.
Yeah, makes sense.
So going back a little bit to something you kind of talked about in the stolen bases, that it made me think, the attempts matter. So I think just personally, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know anybody working in teams or how they operate, but do we think in general people are going to attempt more this year with the rule changes? Is that something that maybe we're not accounting for?
Yeah. So I was pretty comfortable with the way I projected stolen bases last year based on what we saw in the minors, and I was pretty spot on with it. Which what we saw was a bit of an uptick in attempts and a pretty drastic rise in success rate. Now, stolen bases were being successful on I think 80+% of attempts last year, which is a high number. Now, the thing that I think we could see next year, right now the bat is kind of just projecting it to be the same, but I'm tempted to change it a little bit because what would make the most sense next year is if you're being so efficient like that, essentially you're leaving value on the table. You want to be closer to equilibrium. If you're being successful on 80% of your attempts and break even is say 70%, why aren't you stealing more? Steal a little bit more because it's still plus EV to keep doing that. And so what we could see this year is the success rate drop and attempts to go way up. It's possible. I don't know. That's kind of the way I would think about it from a game theory perspective. Whether teams do that or not, I have no idea.
Do you think that would apply evenly across the board, though, that it wouldn't really have an overall effect on individual players?
Generally, the effect I found was that the speedier guys got a little bit more benefit than non-speedier guys or even mid-tier guys. I know before last season, there was a lot of speculation okay, well, the speedy guys are already stealing as much as they can. They're not going to steal more, right? It's going to be these middle guys that steal 10 and now they're stealing 15. And I think it is more linear. I think it's the speedy guys get the most benefit, and then the guys that are really slow get none because they're not going to try anyway. I forget, what was the question? I was going somewhere with that.
No, that was the question, was just if attempts go up and success rate goes down, is there an adjustment to be made or to individual players, or is it more of an overall effect?
Yeah, I would expect the speedier guys to get a little more relative value.
Okay. So then the other thing less discussed than stolen bases, I think, in content in the rule changes is we're going to be in the second year of the shift ban. So I guess what did you see as a result of that from last year and going into predicting this year?
Yeah, we saw more or less what we expected. The overall league impact wasn't huge. A handful of points of BABIP. The guys that were getting shifted a lot, tended to do a little bit better. It was more or less kind of what we thought it would be. I know some talking heads or whatever thought well, we're not going to get into that, but I mean,
nobody's watching the show, so you can. Okay, so this year, I guess, similar question as stolen bases. Then, do you think there's going to be adjustments by teams, either hitters, like more hitters could take advantage of it, seeing who did succeed, or are teams going to make different defensive adjustments potentially?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think to the extent teams are able to make defensive adjustments now, they've done it. They're restricted to a certain extent, and so maybe I'm missing something, but I wouldn't expect anything to be too different next year in that regard.
And what about do you think there's players that could still benefit more, or they're pretty maxed out on the advantages?
I think pretty maxed out. I mean, unless some guys, because right now you can't do the full shift, but you can still do a shaded shift where the shortstop is standing right on the edge of second base and whatever. If they stop doing those, I don't know why they would, but then some players might get benefit. Some players who weren't getting shifted at all now maybe start getting the shaded shift, and that hurts them a little bit. That's the kind of thing. But in general, I think the effects are going to be pretty negligible from year to year.
And then the one slight change that we have to the rules is now with runners on base, I think they're losing 2 seconds of time on the pitch clock. Are you adjusting for that at all this year?
I haven't yet. It seems like most pitchers, it's not going to impact that much. It could. The biggest thing the pitch clock did was the stolen base stuff, so it's possible we see a little bit more of an uptick from it, but it's hard to quantify what does 2 seconds mean? What kind of impact does 2 seconds have? So I'm probably not going to do anything, at least to start.
Did you do any retroactive analysis on, pitchers that were affected, or like in terms of getting that underlying skill value, that you're projecting across the innings? Like, did you? I mean, it doesn't really, because the rule's the same this year, so it doesn't really apply going forward. But I was just curious if you did any retroactive identification of players that might have been really affected by it.
Alek Manoah. No, I don't. I mean, obviously, he's the guy that people point to a lot of times. They're like, he couldn't handle the pitch clock, and that's why he sucked. But I think the problem is really just that, even if we can identify a few guys like that we think maybe, it's really hard to put a confidence number on that. It's just kind of, this happened to happen to these guys. It could have just been random.
Yeah, because Aaron Nola is the one that was one of the guys that was out there talking about it, and in the playoffs they're talking about how he ended up starting to look at a different clock than he was looking at before, and that all seems like a lot of conjecture.
Yeah, I think there was I saw a study on that where the Philly clock was a little bit faster.
It was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it actually was. And they complained a lot. They were very loud and vocal about their pitch clock, and it turned out somehow, some way, it was actually it was faster. I don't know what it was. I don't know that's why Nola didn't have a great season, but there was I think The Athletic did something or some publication that they showed that it was faster.
All right, I did not prep you for this question, but it sort of came to me as we were talking through this. Have you a question that we get a lot from people is there any teams this year that, especially offensive teams, that are going to surprise or surprise good or bad this year? I don't know if you had a chance to run team totals and stuff for teams yet.
Yeah, I do have them. I haven't dug too deep in yet. Let me take a quick look here. So off the bat, I'd say the Cardinals probably project better than people would expect them to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw Dakota had them on top of the division.
Oh, okay. Too. Well, the bat does too. A team like the Reds that people are really excited about. They have young guys, they have upside, but they don't project well. I mean, there's always going to be teams. It kind of depends on what your stance on certain guys are, but those are the two that stick out the most to me right away.
The one that I was thinking about is Baltimore, where, in that division, a lot of people are excited about that young core too. And I think last year you were a little bit lower than the field.
I was not a big Baltimore believer last year, and I was expecting the bat to not really like them this year. It actually kind of likes them. So, my guess is not always right. And that's why I use a projection, because it's going to think about things objectively. Whereas me, I'm like, Orioles suck. How'd they do that last year? They're not going to repeat it. And the bat's like, well, they project for 87 wins, so maybe they'll be pretty good.
Yeah, I think the other one that stood out, what did you say, Nez, in the chat? What the other team that stood out in Pacoda?
Well, the Pacoda is really, really bullish on the Yankees. I noticed, very much so, and I think, at least in my small bubble, maybe I'm just filled with too many jaded Yankee fans or something, but it doesn't seem like that kind of is the sentiment. So
You're right. I get the same impression. I should have noticed that. In my head, I'm like, the Yankees are really good. Everyone knows the Yankees are really good. They don't, though. A lot of people kind of think the Yankees are not that good anymore.
Yeah.
But no, the Yankees are really good. The bat right now, if you look at its projected standings, the top tier is the Braves and the Dodgers, kind of head and shoulders above everyone else. And then the next tier is the Astros and the Yankees. Like the Yankees are a really good team. Especially their offense is probably going to be really good.
Yeah, I think that absolutely checks out, and maybe just like people not quite understanding or maybe appreciating what a lineup with Soto and Judge can do for a team and how much that has an impact. So yeah, that'll be fun to watch play out. A question that I have is just when it comes to projecting on a daily basis, is the projection system sort of going through a similar process that it does on a season long, where based on its range of outcomes, it's using the same figure, I guess you could call it, that comes from the season long stuff?
Yeah, it's the same projections that drive both. It's just a matter of projecting it different ways. On the daily level, we know the exact lineup position for every guy. We can project pitch counts. We can, project things like umpires that on the season long level, like you don't know who the umpires are going to be. So like, it just doesn't matter. But yeah, it's more or less the same. Like the underlying talent level projections are the same that go into both of them. It's just a matter of projecting for each context.
And you mentioned umpires. Have you toyed around with or have any hypotheses on what robo umps could mean for production of players? Or is that just Pandora's box for you?
I'm so dreading that day. So no, I have not even started to think about it yet because I don't want to.
That's fair. Neither do I. I hope it never comes, honestly, but it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a similar boat. For me, it just doesn't like affect games that much that I think it really even matters. Like
I'm a purist in that way.
And it just applies randomly over the course of the season. So I don't know that just like making the rule change to the row umps, like I don't feel like it makes that much fairer of a situation, or I don't know what it solves for other than people getting outraged at individual calls.
And then you open up the Pandora's box, though, of like, okay, well, you got to make sure that these robo umps are like really, really good, and that there aren't ways to game the system. Like, you can just like drop a curveball and like just nick the back corner or something, and it's not really a strike, but like technically it's a strike, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank God we don't have to worry about that yet.
Yeah. I do not want to ever.
I do know you've been working on a little bit more of a pitching model improvement. I know that's a long time in the works. How is that going? And obviously, we don't have the Bat X for pitchers. We see that yet, but I assume you're still working on that.
Yeah, definitely still working on it. It's been a long process. I started 7 years ago. It's still not done yet, so that tells you. There's been a lot of different iterations of it. The advanced data that we have on pitchers is so complex, and we have it at such a granular level that it really takes like really sophisticated models to get the effects measured well enough. For hitters, like there's not as much. We have the barrels and the exit velocity and whatever. But with pitchers, we have, a pitch, we have data on the pitch, every single point in space on its way to the plate, and like all these different things, variables that interact with each other. And it's just so many different things that, I tried building some models myself originally, and they weren't really good enough, and it was just like a clunky process. And then I realized, okay, I really need to be doing like machine learning with this, and using like really advanced models, but I don't know that. So let me hire some people. I'll work with someone to help me build this. I hired 2 people. They both kind of flaked after a while, and they just didn't work out. Now I hire, I'm working with a new machine learning company, Deuce of Diamonds Analytics, and they're great. I'm also learning a lot from them. So like I'm learning to do the machine learning and the Python coding and all that kind of stuff myself, so that I'm actually like a lot more hands-on than I would have been with either of the other two ones building this thing. But every time you take a step forward with it, like you learn something and you're like, well, this could have been done like way better, 2 steps before this, or like, so like there's always something new going on. But I think it's in a really good spot right now. I feel really good about the spot that it's in and the progress we're making. And I'm not going to put a date on it yet, but it is coming sooner rather than later. As long as I've been saying that, I do think it's time.
This might be like a silly question, but with all of this information that you're using machine learning for, what you're trying to solve for, what you're trying to output is like pitching statistics, right? That's like the ultimate goal is to come out of this, is to give us pitching statistics that we can apply to however we choose to, right? Or are you trying to like create a data package to like outsource to teams with this? What is, I guess, the goal for the pitching stuff that you're working on?
I mean, I'm not closing any doors, but
Sure.
the main goal really is just to make a best in class system, the way I've always tried to do. And there's, I'm late to the game now, even though I started before everyone else. There's a lot of other people out there with pitch models that I'm behind now. Like there's Stuff Plus and there's PLV and there's Pitching Bot.
Right.
Like people are doing this like in a good way already. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to account for things that I don't think that they are. I'm trying to make it as good as I can make it. And then I'll kind of have my own, stuff metric essentially.
Right.
And then I will also roll that into the projections to make the projections more accurate, which I think is going to be pretty huge too.
Very cool. Yeah, I guess that was the roundabout way, is like, are you coming with your own Stuff Plus? But that's exciting. I'm glad that you're making progress on that. Very excited to see what comes from that.
Yeah.
Anything else in the near future for you? I guess, what are you doing this year? If anybody wants to follow your work, what's your plate look like?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Derek Carty. You can find the bat projection system for free at Fangraphs for season long, by subscription at Roto Grinders for DFS, at EV Analytics for sports betting. I'll be on a bunch of different shows, the Roto Grinder shows for DFS. I'll be on sports betting shows, definitely with covers. I don't know everything. I haven't finalized a lot of stuff yet, but there will be some good stuff happening. If you are into sports betting, the bat has been so good. I'm just really excited for that. And I don't know. I'm just excited for the year. I'm glad baseball's back.
Yeah, it's our draft season got started way earlier than last year on Underdog, so it's silly to be at this point in the year for us and not even had spring training start. So the excitement is definitely building. All right, so everybody, thanks for listening. If you have been looking for I'll hide this at the end so we're not strong committed to this, but this week we should have an update to our Underdog rankings. Nez is taking over for Brendan, and I will, if they're not up, it's probably my fault, and I haven't done mine yet. So if you see this and we don't have the updated full rankings updated on the site, you can yell at me online. But so Derek, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. So for Nez and Derek and myself, thank you for watching.